Oh, I like the haircut.
Thank you. Who's this? You're modeling on it. Wonderful. So go ahead and open Unreal. Open any project you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be. It could be last week's group project, or it could be the Oregon project. What we're going to do applies to either one. So as long as you're in Unreal, I'm going to teach you how to make your own custom materials.
You know what?
So far, we're tracking materials from the starter content, the ones that were created for us. Today we're going to create our own. So it's a fairly sophisticated system. It's a bit like Blueprints. It's a visual system. You have wires and things that you drag into other wires, and that determines what your material is going to look like. So go ahead and sit down if you're not seated at your desk already. And make sure you're logged in.
This chair right there. Hey, this is chair right there.
So I do want you at your normal computers so that everybody can follow along. So not at your group projects, not at your group projects, your group computers. So make sure you're back in your normal seat. What? All right. By the way, the live stream is up, so go to YouTube, type in .war Games. You can find it under the upload section. We finally figured it out. If you click on the account and you click on uploads, the first video every time is going to be whatever's live. So you'll see the one that says live stream. So you definitely want to do that today since there'll be a lot on the board to follow along with. So you definitely want to pull up the YouTube channel so you can see my screen. You don't know Spanish? So hopefully you've figured out how to get the stream by now. It says stream starting soon. You're all in Unreal, right? And we're going to start our lesson at the front of the editor. So if you're in Blueprint scripts or something right now, make sure you're in the front. And the first thing we're going to do is we'll start with the content browser. I'll begin in a minute since I do see a few people whose projects are still loading. In the meantime, are there any questions I can answer from last week or things that you discovered making your own projects that now you have questions about? Anything? No, sir. Anybody else? Questions that you have from last week? I was really impressed with the projects you guys did. Just about everyone did something very unique and original and delved in and at the very least did do what we've been learning. And I'll tell you this much. That was our 4th week together. 4 weeks into the game design program, the stuff you guys are doing. This doesn't happen at the college level. It certainly doesn't happen at the high school level. You guys are rapidly advancing, so I hope you're happy about that.
I'm really glad considering that we're actually doing stuff.
Yeah, right? Well, those first couple of weeks were tough, right? We had to kind of get into the mindset of like showing up to class and actually working, which is sort of tough to do when you've had months of not doing that. But does it feel like it's paid off a little bit? You feel like your skills? Kind of.
Actually learning.
Yeah.
I literally am learning how to use a program on this computer for my whole life.
Yes, yes. That's the thing. Everybody loves to learn. Everybody loves to learn. You just have to have the right situation that encourages that. So, be encouraged, guys. You guys are becoming skilled at something that very few people are. Stick with it long enough, and you'll be incredibly hireable. Or you can make your own businesses out of what you're going to learn. Like I said, Unreal's used in film, not just game stuff, architecture, commercials, all kinds of stuff. Computer won't work? It's start unplugged. Can you plug it back in? Yeah? Okay. I'll give it a couple more minutes. You know what we'll do is I will play a video, and that way, by the time the video is over, we should all be ready to begin. Like I said, though, when we do begin, we'll be starting at the front of Unreal, and we'll be doing something in the content browser.
I hear you.
Okay, so the other class I showed like a video on game stuff from extra credits. We're going to show you how the Beatles made The Making of Tomorrow Knows, Never Knows. It's like, well, how does it relate, man? I could say, well, we're all artists here, and this relates, but also I just like it, so that's why it relates.
The Beatles always looked for other sounds in their records, and they all had tape machines which they used for recording demos. And they found that by making tape loops, they could create sounds that people had never heard before. One of the most recognizable loops on Tomorrow Never Knows is the sound of, well, it sounds like seagulls squawking. It's actually the sound of, I think, Paul laughing and speeding himself up, which is this. Another loop is just made up of guitars being recorded over and over again sped up and slowed down, turned backwards. And they sound like trumpets. And then, early days of sampling, Paul actually recorded an orchestra off a vinyl record and created a chord here.
I had a bit of a problem. How were we going to use the collection of sounds? I devised a way of playing 5 loops at the same time. And if you brought up the faders, it was like bringing up an organ stop. Each one had a different tape loop playing all the time. So you could make your sounds as you wished.
And these tape loops are running and running and running. And the Beatles and my dad and Jeff Emerick performed on the desk, pushing up faders at the right time in order to create the instrument sounds they wanted for the mix. So the actual mix of Tomorrow Never Knows is a performance. It can't be recreated.
If you look at everything that's happening in that recording, it's like a prophecy of pop music in one song. With the sampling and the loops, there's so much happening there that will be active for the next 4 or 5 decades.
You can look at hip-hop and using samples or scratching in music. The Beatles were doing that in Tomorrow Never Knows. That song makes you rethink what music is. It's that profound.
This was the dawn of creating a new kind of magic. This was really fantasy stuff.
Cool. All right. So go ahead, and I hope you're in the front of Unreal now. We're going to get started on the lesson. So everything's streaming, everything's good. What I want you to do is, oh yeah, if you have my audio up on the stream, either use headphones because it is delayed and it'll confuse me. So make sure the audio is down to a minimum, and then you could. That's fine if you use earphones to listen to the live stream. Now we're in the front of Unreal. Go ahead and go to your starter content folder and go into that materials folder. We're familiar with this, and we're gonna find any of these materials. And
Copy one.
no, we're not copying. I want you to go to let's go to gold, metal gold, and then double click it. Okay, double click it, and then make sure that you have a big window for it so you can see everything. I'm gonna close out my windows over here. No, we're not modeling.
Wait. I'll try to check.
We're doing material editing today, okay? So if you double click the material, you get this whole new graph. And it's like, what am I looking at? Well, first of all, to move around, same deal as blueprints. Hold right mouse button down and move your mouse. That'll let you move. Scroll wheel on your mouse will let you zoom in and out, okay? And I told you at the beginning of our course about 5 weeks ago that a material is a picture plus math. Pictures plus math is basically the magic of materials. And here we have this very good looking, convincing gold material. And this is the code that makes it look the way it is. Okay? This code isn't that sophisticated. It's a little bit complex. You got some math going on here. It's 0.5, 0.3, something called a LERP, which stands for linear interpolation, which sounds craziness. And if you want to make your parents think that you're learning something in this class, just tell them today that you learned about linear interpolation, and then they'll be impressed. What that is that's just saying take a number, take a second number, and blend some point in between them in this alpha part, which is to say, for example, if these numbers were pictures, and alpha was 0.5 or 50%, it would have half of one picture and then the other half of the picture perfectly kind of overlaid each other, right? That's what linear interpolation is. We're not going to do any LERPs or linear interpolation today, but I'm just explaining what that is in this graph. Important part here is you have this thing called the results node of the material. So everything that makes a material look the way it does happens because it plugs into this object here, this node. Every material has this. The big factor for this is base color, that top one. And yeah, so I just wanted you to see that and kind of get comfortable with it. We have a details panel on the left. So the details panel for the material editor is actually in the lower left by default. And so if you click on something, you can change it to values in the details panel, which you're used to. So click exit on gold. If it asks you to save, hit no. I want to show you now another material. This time we're going to open our ocean material. So we didn't do anything. We just looked at it, right? I want you to now look at your ocean materials, M water ocean. Double click that. And move around and go ahead and see what's going on here. The reason I want you to open this out, this is a complex material. There's a lot going on here, right? And everything that's going on here is aimed at achieving this water effect so that you have a realistic water. And it's totally okay if none of this makes sense to you. You can look at it and sort of get an idea of what's happening. There's division. What's that? I chose ocean. Lake you can do as well. It's a little less complex. Lakes, I wanted to show you the most complex one, because there's just so much going on here. But remember, all of this code, all of this math on the left is all aimed at sending something to this results node. You can see, even with all that math, there's only 3 things that go into the final product that makes the material look the way it is. Something goes into base color, something goes into roughness, and what's going into roughness is like just a number, and then something goes into normal. So all that calculation is aimed at just going into that results node, this thing. Okay? So now you get an idea of what's going on there. Go ahead and click out. So exit that. If it asks you to save, hit no. And now let's make our own brand new custom material from scratch. Thank you. So what I want you to do is look in your lower left. You're in the front of Unreal, the green Add New button. Click the green Add New button and choose Material.
What the material will be?
I don't know yet. What do you want it to be? So I'm going to go ahead and do that now instead of put something away. So I hit Add New. I'm clicking Material. It's going to ask for a name, or you can just name it. I'm going to name mine M_tutorial material. That way I can find it and know what it's for. So this is just a tutorial on materials. Once you're happy with the name, double click it so we can look at its graph. Make sure you have a full window for this so we can fully see its graph. It's a blank graph by default. The only thing you have on here is the results node. This cannot be deleted. This is always on the material. And even by default, you can see it's kind of making this black thing because it can't just show nothing. Now what I want you to do is right-click somewhere in this graph and type in the word texture. And choose Texture Sample. Texture Sample. With Texture Sample selected, you can look in the details here. And there's a texture option. It's none by default right now. We haven't set it. Click on the drop-down that says none. And now you can pick from any texture in your entire project. The whole game.
How we change it?
So you have Texture Sample selected. You have details on the left.
Oh.
Right. You click that drop down that says next to texture, it says none. And you want to find a texture. If you want to follow along as far as what texture I'm doing, I want to type in tech because there's that really cool tech material somewhere in here. Actually, no, you know, let's not do that. Let's do... You know, we'll start out with a brick clay thing. So there's something called brick, type in brick. And then there's one called clay old. And you want the one that looks like the brick. You don't want to pick the blue textures. I'll explain what those do in a minute. You want to choose the one that looks like a brick, brick clay old. Yeah, it's a D at the end, that's right. And you'll see there's a bunch of different circles which you can drag off of different wires from this texture. What these are color channels. Okay, so there are some times when you're doing this shader material math that you want to only get the red numbers, the red values from a texture, or the green, or the blue, or this last one which is alpha.
Where's alpha?
It's the very last one. But we're not going to do anything with alpha. The top one, which is white, is the whole color of the texture. Well, that's perfect. So what we want to do is drag that top circle and just drag it into base color. Drag into base color, and you give it a minute, and you'll see your material update on the left here. There it is. Now our material looks like the texture. We could call it a day here and say, that's good, we have bricks now. But it doesn't look very good. If I scroll over it, there's like this light that just reflects off of it, and it doesn't behave very realistically. This is kind of how textures and shaders worked in the old games, right? In like 2003 and stuff. This was all what was going on. But again, we're in 2018. We have sophistication. We have math at our side. All kinds of usefulness to make this look as real as humanly possible. Now the secret to these sorts of things is a second texture that most materials will use called the normal map. The normal map. So remember that blue, you saw those blue textures? That's a normal map. I'll explain what that is in more detail, and you'll get a better sense as we go along, but a normal map is essentially a way of recording geometry, height, but not actually having any geometry, not having any modeling. So you can have a material have this illusion of depth where it's like, oh, that crevice is clearly higher than that part and stuff, but it's actually not there. It's an illusion. Normal maps are basically the magic of materials. So we'll have you do that in a second. So right-click, type in the word texture. We're going to get another texture. Choose texture sample. And in the details panel, where it says texture, it says none, click the drop down, and this time type in that brick, clay. But this time you want to choose the one that's blue. It says T, brick, clay, beveled, and then underscore N. Yeah, sure. You click the one that says N. And it's the blue one. And wait for that to load. Now don't do this. I'm just going to do this to show you. If I double click on my normal map, you can see it says blue with some pink and stuff. And you can see it kind of looks 3D, right? It's just an image, but it's an image that records 3D data. But it's just a texture at the end of the day. So it looks like that. Now what you want to do is plug the white channel of that into the part of your results that says normal. So plug it into normal. And sometimes it'll make it go faster if you hit apply in the upper left, generally. Oh, you know, I actually chose the wrong one. Let's see. What was my T? You can choose different. You don't have. They don't have to be the same, but you have varying results. So mine's called brick, clay, old. So I want to make sure I chose beveled. So I'm going to relook up my my normal map. Type in brick, clay, old. Okay. So I would do this. Go ahead and change your normal map to the one that says brick, clay, old. Brick, clay, old. Yeah. No, N. The blue one. Okay. All right. So once you've done that, if you look at this, it behaves differently with the light. Like you can see, I'll make this bigger. You can see how the light reacts to even these crevices. And you can see it looks like I almost put like my finger in there. It's just like this indentation. I think someone's in there. When they get back, go ahead. So you see this indentation. But it's all happening because of the normal map. Now there are other settings we can change about this. What if we wanted to look shiny or look like almost it's made of metal?
Or even make it look polished.
Polished? Okay, so polish and for like what you're talking about and shininess would basically be affected by two categories here. One called metallic, the other one called roughness. So let's plug something into these. Let's plug first in, let's plug into roughness. So what I want you to do is right click and type in the word constant. And then choose the one that comes up called constant. This is just a number, one single number, a float value actually, so fractional, right? Super simple. Take a look at the details panel on it, and it's like it only has one setting possible called value. Leave it at 0. We'll change it in a second, but go ahead and plug it into the roughness. Plug it into roughness. And if you leave it at 0, you'll look, you've got an extremely shiny brick material. And what's cool is it looks wet. So if you had a rain scene, this would be super perfect to have as your floor tiling. I mean, it looks so realistically wet. And it's all because we set that roughness to 0. So we'll leave this tab up, but let's go to the front of Unreal, and let's drag this new material onto something in our scene. So it's called M tutorial material. I'm going to drag it onto my television set here. I'll drag it onto my floor too, although it's going to stretch, but have on my floor. Now if I want to make this more shiny, let's do something. We'll jump back into our material editor. Let's grab another constant, and this one was going to go into metallic. So right click, type in constant, choose constant, plug this one into metallic. And metallic. And metallic and roughness sort of work opposite each other. When roughness is at 0, it's shiny, but when metallic's at 0, it has no metalness. So you change metallic to 1 to be. By the way, these are from 0 to 1, so it's 0 to 100%. If you go to something higher number, it's not going to do anything. So what I'll do is I will change. Now I've plugged metallic into this new number. I'm going to change that to 1. Yeah, change metallic to 1. Now what do you got? The super shiny material here.
It might as well be just thrown in like a...
What's fun about this is you could really see the depth created by the normal map. You know.
It looks like it's just thrown in the brick pattern wall.
Yeah, yeah. It really looks like a super realistic brick pattern. That's mostly that normal map doing its job. So what I want you to do is everybody go to the front of Unreal. We're going to do something different now. So what we just did so far is we created a material and we coded it. But what if I want a few different versions of that same material? What if I want dry bricks, wet bricks, metal bricks, stone bricks, you know, with these different settings? How do I make it so I can have several different versions of this? Well, one logical idea would be, okay, I just duplicate the material, you know, and I make 4 of them or 5 of them or whatever. And so what you want to do is you could duplicate it, okay? You could have 5 different materials with 5 different graphs, and just like we did, go in here and change all of these numbers one by one. But there's a couple problems with that. 3 of them actually specifically. Number 1, it takes really long. So like right now, you've noticed if I change this, just this one value from 1 to 0 again, it's then got to compile. And I got to wait. And it can take 30 seconds to a minute. And if you have something really complex, like those water materials, it can take really long. Okay? So you got that. And you don't even know if you like it until it compiles. It won't show you that. So you have that problem if you're just using the graph. And then the other problem is every material that looks like this with a graph has to run on your player's computer. It has to be compiled for. And then it has to be drawn to the screen. And even if you have 5 different, like it's called M tutorial material, whatever. If I have M tutorial material 1, M tutorial material 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, if they all have these graphs, that's 5 materials that have to run calculations. In fact, in the lower bottom here, it says 108 instructions. That's saying that just this graph so far is calculating 108 instructions that have to be run on your computer. And if you have too many materials in a project, your game will either crash or lag or worse. So there is a way around this, though. I guess what's worse than a crash is customers not buying your game because it's crashing, right? Because they hear about it. So you want your game to be performant optimized. Now there's a really great way of doing this. This is through something called making parameters, right? A parameter is like a variable. We made variables for our character earlier, where he had battery power and stuff like that. And a variable is something you can change outside of something. In materials, they're just called parameters, something we can change. So there's some of this that we would want to change later on. So looking at our graph, go back, make sure you're on your graph now, by the way. I want you to select the number that's plugged into metallic and right-click it, and then choose Convert to Parameter. It's going to ask you to name it now. I'm going to name it Metalness. All right? Metalness.
Just click on none on it. Click on none. Just click on it until it says.
What we're doing is you're selecting your number and you're right-clicking it and choosing Convert to Parameter. That's what you're doing. And I want you to do it for the roughness number as well. So number plugged into roughness, right-click, convert it to parameter. This one, name it roughness. And we're going to do one more thing. This is something I love doing whenever I make materials, is I like being able to change the basic kind of color of something. So I have this kind of gray brick, but what if I wanted a red brick? What if I wanted black brick? What if I wanted some kind of white brick or whatever? Well, you can do this by tinting it and making a parameter that has that tint number, that tint value. So tint's just a color. And the way you can do that is you can multiply this texture by a color, and then the output of that goes into base color. And then whatever the result of that will be your tinted material. So everybody following along, we're going to put just something in between this texture going into base color, drag off of the texture sample, and type in the word multiply. And you get this multiply. And it's got an A channel, and then you have the output. Go ahead and plug in the output into the base color. So it's just that circle on the right. That's going to be the result of what you multiplied. Plug into base color. And then for the B channel, drag off of it, and we're going to get a color. And a color is just called a vector. Okay? Type in vector parameter. Or just type in vector, and it'll come up. And choose vector parameter. It's just a color. That's all it is.
Wait, what do we click again?
We're dragging off of the B channel of our multiply, and we're typing in vector. I'm choosing vector parameter. And actually, it's defaulted to black. You can see it created this black-looking material, which looks pretty cool, especially when shiny. But what I want you to do is I want you to default that value. So in the details with the color selected, default it to white. So make it white, and that'll just mean that it's at our normal texture color. And name the parameter, name it tint, T-I-N-T. So you can click that color, and then the details panel, name it to tint. So now that you've done that, we have enough settings in here that we can change outside. So go ahead and hit save and go back to the front of Unreal. And in the content browser, find that material. And instead of duplicating this material, like you would think you would do if you wanted to have a black version, a blue version, a wet version, a rough version, a smooth version, and all the stuff that we set up. Rather than duplicating it, what we do is we create an instance of it. we create what's essentially a child. So you think that this is a programming concept. You have something called the parent, which has all the functions and code that runs on it. And then you can have children that look like the parent, that act like the parent, but can have differences, right? The same way that you have differences with your siblings, right? But you kind of are all still look the same, but similar, but not totally the same. It's the same idea. So to do that in the sense of making it for materials, you right-click your material. So I'm right-clicking M tutorial material, and at the very top of the new window that comes up, click Create Material Instance. Create Material Instance. And you get a new material. This time it's a material instance. And drag that onto some object in your scene. I will drag it onto this wall here.
So there are instances.
And then double-click the material instance. And you're going to get a very different looking editor than we did with the normal material. And what this is this material is streamlined just to show us our parameters, our variables, the things we want to allow us to change. And you'll see you should have here tint, metalness, roughness. These are the things that we created. Yeah, question?
How do I get the instance down again?
You right-click on your material that you created in the content browser, and you hit Create Material Instance.
Okay. I did that, and what do I do?
Then you double-click that material instance.
Ah, okay, nice.
And it should look like this. Now go ahead and hit the check mark next to these settings so that they're editable, and change, for example, its tint. And if you change its tint, the third huge benefit, because I mentioned two of them already, to using material instances, the third huge benefit is they don't have to be compiled for. All of their work was done on the parent material. So me changing the colors happens instantly. Any of these settings I do happens in real time, including if, and go ahead and do this. This is why we do the video, so you can catch up if you're behind. Drag this material into your world. You can have 1,000 objects in your world with this material, and if you change its tint, they will all change instantly with absolutely no loading time or lag in between. That's the power of material instances. And you can change its metalness and its roughness and all this thing. So I've got this cool blue Sherlock Holmes-esque, London fog-like brick now. Now, I mentioned before, well, what if you want to have multiple materials, right? Well, if I want to have multiple bricks, I have a blue brick, but now I want to have a red brick, all I got to do is duplicate this material instance, drag that new duplicated material instance, and open up that one, and I can change this. And it's only going to affect that new material instance. So I'm going to change this one to a red. So this is my red brick. So you can see here, I've pulled it up in my material, in my content browser. I've created three material. I've created the parent material, this thing called M tutorial material. It has all the code on it. And then I've created these instances or children. And you can create as many of these instances or children as you want. Just right-click, duplicate, right-click, duplicate. And they all can be different things in your scene. That's about it for our lesson, but I will just say the parameters that you can expose into children aren't just things like colors and numbers that are, scalar numbers, so these parameters like for metal and stuff. You can have texture parameters. That's where the real power of this comes in. So I could go into that material graph, right-click this texture here, convert it to a parameter, name it, texture parameter, and then in my instances literally change the texture of my object. So it becomes incredibly powerful. And you can do that with the normal map as well, and anything. So if I do that, I can now duplicate this, go in, and I'm going fast now, like I'm not expecting you to follow this long, but I now have a texture parameter. I can change the actual the very texture that I'm choosing to use for this. So now I'll do this cobblestone texture. Okay, now it's cobblestone. See? Now,
So putting in a parameter unlocks limits.
what's that?
Putting in a parameter unlocks the texture.
Yeah, putting in a parameter exactly unlocks the ability to change something in the graph. You'll have things in your graph that you don't need to change. Okay, those you wouldn't parameterize. And there's a certain cost to performance. You don't want to parameterize everything. Like if you look on that water material, I think the water ocean material has a tint on it by default you can change, but it has a bunch of other calculations that aren't parameterized, that aren't exposed to the instances, to the children. But anything, virtually anything in the graph can be. And the textures are not an exception to that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that'll be it for this lesson. It is online, so if you need to go back and check and follow along, definitely use that as your resource to use. And thank you very much.